Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Sarah and today I'm going to attempt to blend Sharpies. Now you've probably all heard of Sharpie markers, you may even have some. They are super bright permanent alcohol based markers, but they are not designed to blend like some other alcohol based markers. Now I'm not a marker expert, but I like a challenge, so I raided my supply of Sharpies to try and find the most shades of one colour I could, and so I picked out some blue fine point Sharpies as well as a couple of Sharpie pens. Now what am I going to draw? Before I think about this, I need to think about the paper I'm going to use. My Sharpies have a felt nib, so I needed to use a smooth paper which wouldn't damage that nib, but being that I wanted to try and blend these pens, I didn't want a super absorbent paper either. I decided to try a few different techniques on a few different types of paper, just as a practice before I got into colouring in the main piece. The three papers I chose to try were a smooth thick card, regular computer paper and also a marker paper which, although very thin, is very smooth and designed so that markers don't seep through. So the first technique I tried was to lay down two blue shades next to each other and to go back over the top of these with the lightest marker. So straight away when I laid that first colour down, the two smoothest results were on the card and the marker paper. The computer paper was a lot more absorbent and didn't give a very smooth result. So on the card I tried to go over these two blue shades with the first and lightest shade to see if I could blend them together and not have that stop-start point. But it didn't work too well. You can still see the line where the lightest and the darkest colours meet. And again with the computer paper, not much luck there either because the paper was super absorbent, the ink had dried and I ended up feeling like my markers were just going to go through the paper. So going over with the lightest shade on top of these two blue shades on the marker paper, and after a few goes over that area in the middle, they did blend together and you can see much less of a definite start and stop point where the two colours meet. The second technique I tried was the tip to tip method, where you hold the two markers you want to blend together and the ink transfers from one marker to the next. And you can vary the time you hold them together depending on the effect that you want. So the idea is that the ink transfers from one marker to the next, and when you lay the marker down on the paper, the new colour lays down first and gradually wears off to leave the original colour. You couldn't see this with the darker blue, you could see this slightly with the lighter blue on the card. So I did this again on the computer paper and it didn't work at all. On the marker paper, however, you can see that there's more of a gradient from the darker colour to the lighter colour. So the last technique I used was to try the tip to tip method again, but this time using a colourless blender, which is also alcohol based. Now this works in the same way as the last technique, but allows you to have gradients of one colour blending out to nothing. And again, the amount of blending depends on the time that you hold the markers together for. So you can see that colourless blender starts out with a darker blue and then gradually goes lighter. So it did work on the card, but as the colour got lighter it did look a little bit streaky. It didn't look as smooth a gradient as I was after. Again on the computer paper it wasn't a smooth result at all and didn't really work very well. But on the marker paper the gradient was smoother and that was the paper that I decided to use. So before going into the drawing I just started to play around with different techniques and try and get a feel for how I was going to work my final picture. So this is the paper that I went with, the Daler & Rowney marker paper. and it's quite thin, 70 grams I think, but it does have a shiny surface on one side so that the marker doesn't bleed through. So I decided with my blue markers to draw a picture of Dory and Nemo. So I sketched out a rough outline on my marker paper and went in first of all using the lighter shade that I wanted to blend with the orange. So yellow put down first, then I did the orange, leaving a gap between the two and then going back over with the yellow marker, blending them together, and I was really surprised that it looked quite effective. I then tried laying down the darker colour and going over with the lighter colour to see if I could pick up some highlights on top of Nemo's body to see how that would work. And I also realised that you can actually pick up colour with the lighter marker and then transfer it over to do more shading on the tail fin that I did there. Another thing I tried was on the white areas of Nemo's body was just to blend with a colourless blender from a grey going through to a colourless area on the top of his body so that you can get the effect of shading. I then continued the rest of Nemo in the same way and was quite pleased with how he was turning out. I then used my fine point Sharpie just to fill in the details of his eyes and the black around the stripes and on the tip of his fins. So far so good. So by doing Nemo I got a little bit more confident, and I was confident that I could do Dory in the same way. So I started off on the left side of her face doing the lighter colour marker and then did the darker colour, hoping to transition between the two somewhere in the middle. Now the problem is with Sharpies is that as much as I had a couple of different blues, when I actually laid them down on the paper, a lot of them were very similar. So I didn't really have a really light blue. So I went in with my colourless blender to try and lighten up an area in the middle in between her eyes, because that area I wanted to be lighter so that I could go back and put some detail. She has some little spots on that part of her nose as well, but it didn't really work as well as I'd hoped. Now I could have done the tip to tip method, but being that that's slightly unpredictable, it wasn't one that I decided to go for in the end, because as much as I could have gone from nothing to a nice blue colour and transition gradually, on a larger scale it's not as predictable and I wasn't confident that it would work without being streaky. So the amount of time that you hold the markers to the colourless blender will then give you a different result. So I basically wasn't really confident to use that method, so I tried using the Sharpies blended together and ended up feeling like I was more layering Sharpies than blending them. I did use the tip to tip method with the colourless blender for the top of the fin, as you just saw, and did manage to sort of do some blending in the darkest shaded areas of her mouth. But I was a bit disappointed by the shading and the blending that I did on the blue areas of her body. I was hoping to get some much lighter, brighter shades in there as well using the blending method, but it did prove really difficult, and I think I was limited by the colours I had, but also because as soon as you go to a larger size, the tip to tip method is a bit unpredictable, and also I just didn't feel that it was an even blend. So I think in conclusion then, the blending with Sharpies does work, but is probably better for smaller drawings. And if there was a larger range of colours, this might have made doing Dory a little bit easier if I'd had a lighter blue. And basically the Sharpies are really good for bright sort of flat areas, maybe not so much for blending. Although I did have a lot of fun with this and learnt some new techniques for blending, but maybe they would be better for markers that are more designed to blend. So here I'm now trying to put in those little darker areas on her nose, and I did feel like I was trying to go over the blue areas of her body in layers rather than with blending. So it was a little bit more hard work, a little bit more challenging, but I did have a lot of fun. So I'd love to know what you think of this video, if you've tried blending Sharpies before and how you got on. And if you liked it, then please give this video a thumbs up, comment and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Here are some more videos that you might like to check out.